welcome to the second session of the Penn South Africa Writing in Troubled Times series. The first one kicked off last week on Friday. This is the second one, and it's with Nathi Ngubane, the artist and illustrator. Hi, Nathi.
Hi, Carol Ann. Great to be
How are
chatting with
you?
you. I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine. So I'm going to jump right into it. What we're speaking about today, we are speaking about your beautiful children's book, uh, From the River to the Sea, which is essentially a color. Well, it's not a coloring book. We're gonna get into that, but I just want to introduce you first. And welcome to everyone who's joined us. Thank you for taking the time. These are indeed really troubled times. And I think the matter of what's happening in Gaza sits very heavily on many of us. And I'm so pleased to be speaking to you, Nathi, about this book. So let me just introduce you properly.
Sure.
So Nathi Ngubane is a South African-based writer and illustrator who grew up in Chesterville, a small township in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. After graduating with a diploma in graphic design from the Durban University of Technology, Nathi landed his first freelance gig as a political cartoonist for the Daily Vox. In 2015, he was approached by the Citizen News with a position in political cartooning. In 2018, he resigned to focus on his brand, Think Ahead Comics. His first children's book, Duma Says, Wash Your Hands, Wear a Mask, was published in 2020, a COVID book. I shouldn't call it a COVID book, but followed by Duma Says, Let's Live, a collector's edition with two more stories in the series. In August 2021, Nathi released his book in the series titled Duma Says Your ABCs to Good Health. His work has been featured on Al Jazeera, BBC, the Daily Maverick, New Frame, and others. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, Nathi, because I've called you an artist and an illustrator. I mean, this is very particularly a children's educational book. Just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I started drawing from a very young age. I think from the age of 6, I fell in love with art and writing. And my parents would actually buy me a stack of VCR cassettes from back in the 90s. And I would just get lost into Disney stories and other media. And when I got older, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an artist, and I also wanted to be a writer and make a difference. And I've always also had a passion because I grew up in cramped housing in KwaZulu-Natal, and we hardly had access to running water and electricity. And I've always wanted to be a voice of the voiceless. So I used my art really from a young age to escape my surroundings. And I guess my activism and my passion for human rights, that way it was sparked. And I began following political cartoonists like The Piro, Nanda Subin, John Curtis, Dr. Jack, Steady, a whole lot of our South African cartoonists. And I was inspired about what they were doing, tackling our politics and holding our leaders to account. And that's what I also wanted to kind of get into. So in 2009, I started leaning heavily on political cartoons, and I was still in high school at this time. And I would just, read about what Zuma did, and I would just try my best to pass on my comments as a cartoonist. And by the time I was approached by the Daily Vox, I'd already started getting mentorship from Dr. Nanda Subin. And so, yeah, the Daily Vox approached me. It was during the elections of 2014, actually, where I really started publishing my cartooning work. And that was actually the first time I touched on Palestine. There was a cartoon that I did in 2014, and I've always known about the conflict, and I've always wanted to do more. So in 2019,
I'm
I
gonna,
was,
I'm going to, sorry, go
yeah,
on, go
no
on,
problem.
go on. I'm gonna read something from the book before you start speaking about the book, but go on.
Sure. All right. So yeah, so in 2019, I was approached by Daily Maverick, and we currently have a group called Ubuntu's, where we produce cartoons on social justice. And to really be honest, I really felt home with social justice cartoons because I mean, sure, everybody else is doing politics, but who is who's representing the marginalized communities where I come from.
Yeah,
So it's been quite a journey with, joining Daily Maverick and Ubuntu's and to really live and every single day get to do what I'm very passionate about. And
thank you.
so yeah,
That's lovely. And I'm going to interject just because I didn't want to preempt the conversation. So I think I have shown this up. This is From the River to the Sea. So it's a really, as we get into the conversation, we'll speak more. But I actually just want to read the note to parents, which is on page 2 of this book. I'm going to read a part of it. So I think that encapsulates what this is about. So it goes, a note to parents. We have all watched in horror over the past 100 days as Israeli warplanes and drones have rained down destruction, unlike any on the Gaza Strip. At the time of writing, more than 25,000 Palestinians have been killed. 7,000 other Palestinians are missing, trapped under the rubble, and presumed dead. Another 1.9 million displaced. The scale of brutality, live streamed to our electronic devices no less, has left many of us feeling helpless as the world and international bodies look on and do precious little to stop the carnage. At the same time, the immense brutality meted out to the people of Gaza and all of Palestine has prompted action from millions of people around the world. They have taken to the streets, shut down highways, airports, train stations, and shipping lines. Others have used their creative energies to express their grief by drawing and illustrating murals in their cities and neighborhoods. It goes on to say that South Africa has also taken the Israel to the International Court of Justice. So I really want to ask about this book, which I think is a collaborative process. Can you tell us how it came about? And also, interestingly for me, the fact that it does speak about politics and that it does address children about something which is happening, which is quite plain for everyone to see. It's really what's happened over the last 21 months has been inescapable to anyone with eyes on the planet. So I want to hear a little bit about how this came about and why you decided to address children with politics, which just, by the way, in my generation, I think in South Africa, and I speak from a very privileged position, we have tended to not talk to our children about politics. But this has been so inescapable. So please, yeah.
all right. So just first of all, before I talk about the book, let me just talk about Social Bandit Media, my publisher. So we are basically a media collective, and our goal really is to make sense of the world um, for kids and to also highlight very, very important issues. Um, like what Duma says back in 2020, the book that we released on COVID, we wanted to tell a story about kids who are living in marginalized backgrounds and how they were surviving and thriving. So now we have what has been happening in Gaza for more than 76 years. So that's where this coloring book comes from the river to the sea. And we've always really wanted to take complex and quite difficult topics and make them accessible to the young ones. And because I mean I've always believed and from a very young age that we need to have a conversation uh, with the young ones about what is happening in the world around them. So no child is too young to learn about the human rights violations, the starvation, the bombardments that the people of Palestine have been going through. And with this experience now, since this is you could say this is my second or third children's book, and the challenge really has always been how do we simplify this information for the young ones, and also at the same time knowing our history, our history with apartheid in South Africa, and these conversations are very, very important to build that sense of solidarity and create young activists from a very young age. So in order to make this language, this complicated language, easily accessible to the young ones, we had to do a lot of research. We consulted with teachers and parents, journalists on the ground, Palestinian
This is in
academics.
Gaza. This is in Gaza?
This is about Gaza, yes, Palestinian
Yeah,
journalists in Gaza
yeah.
who've been reporting on the genocide. So parents and teachers as well. So just to make sure that our messaging is child friendly, but also keeping in mind of how important it is to actually bring the young one to the conversation about Palestine. And I guess the simplest way we could do this was to create this coloring book where kids could not only color in, but they can also learn about the Nakba. They can learn about occupation. They can learn about literary icons like Edward Said and Hassan Kanafani, activists like Ahed Tamimi. And kids can also learn about solidarity and what it means to have empathy for those that are being oppressed. So this also really plays on the passion that I have for education as well, to teach the young minds to become activists and brave thinkers. So yeah, that's how our work starts
And
really.
Nathi, when we chatted earlier, I mean, you were telling me that this was quite an inclusive and engaged process putting this book together. And you were telling me, and I say inclusive because one of the people that you in fact mentioned that had been consulted is Ilan Pape, who is a very renowned Jewish Israeli historian and scholar and writer who advocates for a single democratic state for Israelis and Palestinians. And he was one of the people that you spoke with. Just tell us a little bit about that kind of very serious and deep intellectual engagement with one of the, one of the more vocal scholars of a democratic state in the Middle East.
Well, so my publisher, Azad Etta, that he wrote that message for the parents. I mean, he was fortunate enough to get in touch with Ilan Pape and get his views and get his insights and advice on the coloring book. As I said, Social Bandit Media is a media collective, and I mean, um, without the many hands that have really touched this book, I don't think we would have really gotten as far as we've had. So, having people like Ilan Pape to really look at the book has been quite, it's really an honor, and it was a way really to to help us check if we are on the right path with this coloring book before going into print, and to make sure that our messaging was as clear as possible.
So I just want to, I mean, it's a bit difficult to kind of show what the book is about, but when I
Yeah.
say that it's a deep engagement, though it is, simplified for children, it's nonetheless it does certainly encourage them to look at things from a different perspective. So kind of I'll just really briefly page through the book. It goes through the land. It speaks about uh, what Palestine is. It speaks about the Nakba, which happened in 1948 when Israel was created. It speaks about the occupation, which is in fact a UN definition. It is called occupied Palestine. It speaks about prayer, Dome of the Rock. It speaks about Palestine. It speaks about the orange groves. It speaks about the olive groves. Edward Said, the writer, uh, Ghassan Kanafani, absolutely world famous writer. But it also does things which are a little bit, just more information. Well, it's not informational. Actually, the keffiyeh is a major symbol. I wonder if you could just read us the page on about the keffiyeh, the information, and then of course there's an opportunity to color in as well. That's on
Sure.
page 28.
All right. Okay. Kafia. The kafia is a traditional scarf that symbolizes the Palestinian people. It symbolizes solidarity and strength and a shared struggle for justice. The patterns on the Palestinian kafia comprise three main designs. The olive leaves represents strength. The fish net shows the relationship between Palestinian fishermen and the sea, one of grace and abundance. The bold lines represent the trade routes that created a rich Palestinian culture.
Thank you. So I think a lot of people don't actually know that about the KPS. So there's a lot of information in the book. But I also want to speak a little bit about the politics, which I think, which is why we're here. And when this book was in fact published, which was, I think, 3 to 4 months into the start of the Israeli war against the people of Gaza. You can answer, but I just want to add in some things. And what I find really courageous and interesting is that this book was published so very early, when, at the moment, I think many global agencies, organizations, scholars have said that this is a genocide. Even the International Court of Justice about 8 months ago called it a probable genocide at that point. But when this book first came out, there were very few voices who were willing to say, it was a genocide, though I think it became very apparent quite soon that this was more than retaliation against Hamas. There was no critical mass of voices in opposition, not writers, not artists, not politicians. Although there were people marching, in cities around the world. So I'm not dismissive of that, but it was very early time in this brutal war for anyone to stick up their hand and say, I oppose this and I'm willing to put my face and my name. And I sound terribly judgmental. And I actually do understand that many people have their livelihoods under threat, particularly American writers. Their livelihoods really are under threat if they are to speak out about that. So I do want to acknowledge that. But there is also part of me that's like, but you have to speak. But this strikes me as something which was immensely courageous to have done so soon. I think it was 3 or 4 months. And just won't you tell me the kinds of repercussions that have followed? Because anybody who has spoken out about the fact that this has been happening has in some way faced a repercussion or a backlash. There's nobody that can do it without a backlash. And I just want to hear kind of what has happened to you and Social Media Bandit, if you would. But also my gratitude for the courage, which I'm very proud of you for having done that.
Thank you, Karen. So just before the coloring book, actually, I had received backlash because, as I mentioned earlier, I work for the Daily Maverick, and we have a group called Ubuntu's where we produce cartoons on social justice. The first cartoon that I did was a month after October 7th happened for the Daily Maverick. And I'd gotten a little bit of backlash from the readers who were complaining that I was being anti-Semitic. And it didn't really stop there because in January of last year, 2024, I did another cartoon for Daily Maverick. It was a four-panel comic strip, basically talking about South Africa's Ubuntu and why South Africa is in solidarity with Palestinians. So when our lawyers approached the ICJ with the charge of genocide against the Israeli government, that's really where the spark for creating or to continue to create learning material for kids with social banded media came through. And as I've also mentioned, that I've always wanted to do more about the Palestinian cause. And I saw this as an opportunity to rather celebrate South Africa's achievement and solidarity by approaching the ICJ. You know, we were the only country that were brave enough to do that. So I wanted to continue that bravery by actually asking myself, what can I create that will educate kids and capture this moment in our history? So this coloring book came about from the river to the sea. We actually had three titles for the coloring book, and we decided to go with From the River to the Sea, knowing that we are probably going to get quite a bit of backlash once Zionists pick it up. So the coloring book was officially published on February 25th, 2024. And I had my official launch in May of 2024 in Johannesburg. So this was when the Jewish Board of Deputies got a hold of the book, and they put out a Facebook statement basically accusing us of being anti-Semitic and calling for the obliteration of the Jewish people, and really stating that South Africa is a democratic country. How can we have such material on our shelves? So I understand that a few exclusive books were stocking the coloring book, and there was a bit of backlash from the Zionists asking for this book to be removed from the shelves. So exclusive books bowed down to the pressure and they removed the coloring book. And fortunately for myself and Social Bandit Media, a lot of support came our way through the PSC, Social Intifada, and many other pro-Palestinian organizations. They came and they boycotted, they demanded exclusive books to reinstate the book onto our shelves. And at that time, really, I felt that, first of all, we live in a democratic South Africa. And I felt that um, my freedom of expression was being trampled upon. Sure, we may disagree with our politics, but all material deserves to be on our shelves. Palestinian voices deserve to also be on our shelves. So I think after a week later, Exclusive Books put out a statement. The first one was they do not censor or approve books. And then the second one, the CEO of Exclusive Books was interviewed, um, and he stated that after carefully reviewing the content of this coloring book, we do not find it offensive, so therefore we put it back on our shelves. So I was quite confused that, okay, one statement is saying we do not censor or approve books, and the other one is saying after carefully reviewing the content. So I was quite confused with with which side was it really, but I was quite satisfied that the book has been reinstated. Of course, I received a lot of hate messages on LinkedIn, A lot of them, one of them actually stating that once they get a hold of this coloring book, they will burn it. And another person stated that they would love to purchase um, a few copies of this book so they can use it as toilet paper. So, I mean, I knew the backlash was coming, but I must say it did get overwhelming when that did happen. But I mean, I've never received so much hatred, hate messages in my life. But uh, eventually that passed. And then, of course, we can talk about the beginning of this year, where the Israeli police stormed education bookshop in East Jerusalem, and the Israeli police Twitter accounts actually had the coloring book as an example of hate and incitement. So even today, those books are still confiscated. They haven't been returned to the bookstore. So the bookstore owners were arrested. Mahmoud Muna, he was arrested for a few days and then released. And the books that were confiscated have not been returned since today. So it's really been quite. Um, it made me really realize that Israel is very paranoid and very sensitive, to the point where whenever there's a material that aims to rehumanize Palestinians, it will always be met with accusations of anti-Semitic. Um, it will receive a lot of hate, threats of being
Yeah.
banned, and and
Sorry.
yet we have leaders like Donald Trump who are advocating for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and yet they are perfectly fine with that. But a
Yeah.
children's
Uh,
coloring book, you know,
which is
yeah,
informational. I mean, there's absolutely nothing hateful about the book, unless you're going to disagree with me. It's many of these things are factual. Um, they documented in history. But I mean,
yeah,
what's interesting is I think it's called the Barbara Streisand effect. When you want something to be when you want people specifically not to pay attention to it, but you actually draw attention to it, as was the case in South Africa, by refusing to stock the book and so on.
mm,
But I mean, firstly, I have admiration for the fact that that you've done it and that you've put out a second book. But I also want to say I think it's really important and notable to say I am not anti-Semitic. I believe that something is happening, which we will all come to look back on this moment as a horrific. I mean, it's already people have now, there is some sort of critical mass. I think there were I forget how many countries yesterday, European countries, members of the EU, Canada, Australia, I think what we'd call the West, demanded the end of this war yesterday after 21 months, but nonetheless, it's come. So there is something of a critical mass, but I really, applaud the fact that you weren't bullied, and it is frightening. It is frightening to it has been really frightening for many
mm,
people. But you have to stand clear, and you have to say, and I mean, I think that's the beauty of being South African for me. This is what we've
yeah,
been taught, right? We will stand solid in our convictions, and yeah, we'll face the shit. We'll do it because this is who we are. Which and just by the way, the sense of national pride, which you're hearing from me, it has not been very strong with me for a long time. But when South Africa took Israel to the ICJ, I felt okay. I have also supported the Springboks, but I felt a sense of national pride, which I hadn't had for a really long time. So, and this also makes me feel that same sort of national pride, by the way. But let me get on to another question. This is a bit of a sad question, but I think it's important to go there. Since this book was published, um, we've only seen an intensification of some serious brutality that's going to, I'm never going to forget what I've seen. I'm never going to forget it for as long as I live. So, and because this book is really in honor of Palestinian children and the suffering that they've gone through, but is also there to educate all children. But after this book was published, we saw Hind Rajab, the 5-year-old girl who was shot so many times in a car on her own. We saw the little girl, Soul of My Soul, who was shot and killed. There have been babies in incubators who have been left to die. There have been children starved. There have been baby formula being stopped from going into Gaza. We've seen, I mean, I actually have to say each of these things because every time I saw these things happening, I pretended like I didn't see what I just saw because I don't know how we are living on this planet with what we're seeing. So I guess the question after that very long preempting is, would you have done anything differently? Because this book came 8 months, I think, actually, from what you counted just now. It came 8 months into the war on Gaza. Would you have done anything differently if you had known the exact toll? I mean, they're saying the UNICEF is saying 500,000 children killed or injured. I didn't even speak about the amount of child amputees. Would you have done anything different when you were writing this book with social bandit media? And sorry for the emotional question. I had to do
Yes. No, I mean, before I answer that, it's been quite difficult for all of us. I mean, I can't remember the amount of times I became so overwhelmed with the horror that continues to happen in Gaza. And this book really was an introduction to Palestine. And we wanted kids to really imagine, to know that, there's a place called Palestine with its people, with its flora and fauna, with its culture, with its literary icons. So this book really was an introduction to Palestine before, before the genocide, really. And I guess I would say that I wouldn't have done anything differently because when this book came about, like you have also said, Carol, and it was a moment of national pride as being a South African. I just wanted to, I wanted us to quickly show our solidarity as South Africa and where we stood with the people of Palestine. So I wanted to get that out by telling a Palestinian story through a coloring book. But the horror continues. I think 19 people have recently died of starvation in Gaza. So it's just been horrific. Now we have the Handala that's been sabotaged. So the struggle, the Palestinian struggle, really continues, and I guess, as I've said at the time, it was a moment of pride. I wouldn't change anything in the book, but I could say that more work definitely needs to be done in terms of educational material for kids.
We don't have that much time left, and I really do want to speak about two things really. Was the fact that in this book, and I haven't mentioned it so far, but George Floyd is shown in this book. So I want to ask you why that is, and we have to keep it quite tight because we don't have that much time left, Nathi. But also why you have created this very specific link between the Black American or the African American struggle and that link to Palestine, and then also with another book that you've done, which is called Malcolm X in Palestine. And if you can hold it up for us and just also speak about the George Floyd connection, George Floyd being the African American man who was murdered on a pavement in, I think it was Houston, Texas, by a policeman, and he was saying, "I can't breathe," and nonetheless, he was killed. Sorry, I'm trying to be as unemotional as possible. It's not mean I'm not meaning to be cold.
Yeah. No. So the the image of George Floyd, first of all, it was inspired by a mural in Gaza. Uh, it was inspired by a mural in Gaza, and really, to really bring the Black Lives Matter movement and to bring in George Floyd really shows our struggles are really connected. Um, and the the African American struggle really is also the Palestinian struggles. We have African Americans who've been targeted by cops as well, who've been racially profiled. Um, so the racism that we see in the US is also um, there in Palestine, and of course in South Africa, where we come from as well. And um, as I'm about to, get into the new book, Malcolm X in Gaza, Malcolm knew that there was a connection between all liberation struggles. So, it felt it felt relevant to bring in the struggle of Black people as well to show that interconnectedness between all of our struggles and the sense that Palestinians are not free, and a lot of Black people, a lot of Africans are also going through their own genocide, their own conflicts in Sudan and the DRC, the genocide that are going around the African countries. So we can relate to Palestinians. We all share a universal struggle. So yeah, that was the importance of including Black Lives Matter and George Floyd in a Palestinian coloring book.
Can you lift the book up for us? And then I want to talk about solidarity as well. Sorry for the noise in the background. Let me turn off the noise.
No problem.
Okay, so that is Malcolm X in Gaza. And Nathi, you said I just looked at the book very briefly. You said that Malcolm X spent quite a lot of time in Gaza in the 1960s.
Yeah. So Malcolm, so just to quickly touch on why I focused on Malcolm X in Gaza this year. So this year marks 100 years since Malcolm X was born, and and Malcolm's teachings have never been more relevant than they have been today, as we continue to see the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And as I mentioned, Malcolm knew that there was a connection between all liberation struggles, and this focal point of him visiting Gaza is it's not well known, and I've had a few people actually say that they had no idea that Malcolm visited Gaza. So that's part of the reason why we do the work that we do. We want to touch on material that is close to non-existent, and we wanted to make it accessible to the young ones. So Malcolm X in Gaza really is a continuation of the Palestinian struggle and the fact that we need to keep talking about Palestine. It's the only way that we'll keep, you know, the fight alive. And because the world has forgotten about Palestine, we've seen our world leaders, how they've been treating this genocide. Uh, like people just, the double standards and the hypocrisy, ignoring the fact that this is a genocide. So we really, with Malcolm X in Gaza, we wanted to, number one, highlight his visit to Africa and the Middle East, and to also continue the Palestinian conversation and to remind kids that Palestine is a place that exists with its people and culture, and Palestine deserves to exist and continue and have a sovereign state as well. And we also wanted to continue to remind the children about the children of Gaza, really, that are continuing to be losing their lives, starving. I mean, just to also just say one thing about what Israel's been doing is that, I mean, bombing civilians is one thing, but like starving civilians, it's just the pinnacle of cruelty. And we need to continue talking about Palestine. And Malcolm X, he spoke about the hypocrisy that we can still continue to see today. So that's the next book in the line. And I would really like to
Thank you.
continue this work. Yeah.
I want to speak a little bit. I think I've got about 5 minutes left. You used the word solidarity very many times, and that is also something which I feel very passionate about and inspired by, because the concept of finding solidarity beyond your group, beyond your religion, your culture, your race, because we are kind of in an era with those matters of identity kind of rise to the top. And so that what I loved about this book was that you did bring in the African American struggle. And I just wanted to just briefly touch on something I listened to the other day. I listened to a podcast, very strange name. It's called the Blind Boat Club, something like that podcast. It's an Irish podcaster, and he was explaining why the band Kneecap, who's come under significant pressure in the UK for being pro-Palestine, why it's so inherent, not all of Ireland, a certain part of Ireland, why it's so inherent to their culture, because when part of Ireland was under British occupation, they sent quite a brutal army to suppress the Irish. And at some point, this army or group of soldiers were expelled from Ireland by the Irish Republican Army, the IRA. And that same army then went to Palestine and inflicted the same kind of suffering on the Palestinian people that they had just done in Ireland. And so for many Irish people, and I've actually got a friend who has worn her keffiyeh every single day for 21 months. So it is very integral to many Irish people, Republicans, I should say. But I think it's also very integral to South African people who, we know Nelson Mandela said many things, Archbishop Tutu did. Of course, we know now Lady Pandor was behind, taking the Israeli government to the ICJ. But it's also something that I was also raised with. You come through South Africa, it's something which is very close to us. We've also got a massive we've got a massive Muslim population in South Africa. Also, there were many anti-Zionist Jewish people who were right at the beginning in the foundations of the ANC and the UDF. And that was also the very big anti-Zionist struggle that came from Lithuanians and other Jewish people who had fled Europe. So I just also wanted to, from my perspective, see the beauty in the book and the fact that you keep on speaking about that solidarity. Yeah. And yeah, I would hope that there's more of that kind of work coming from you and Social Media Bandit.
No, definitely. I think that as I've also mentioned, is that we really want to bridge the gap and create material that is, not as easily accessible, really. And our work is not over. And I think that our governments and many governments of the world really need to do more to punish apartheid Israel, really. And I guess it all begins with us. We have to boycott. We have to know which companies are associated with apartheid Israel, and just don't support them. Join marches, meaningful marches. We come from a very dark history as South Africa. We know too well the struggles of colonialism and apartheid and oppression. So as a South African, we just have to support our brothers and sisters in Palestine. It was just no question.
Thank you,
So
Nathi.
yeah.
Nathi, thank you so much. I'm not sure if there are any questions. If there aren't any questions, then I'm going to just encourage anyone who's been participating to watch the next it's Ethel Williams will be with PNSA on the 31st of July. He's the exiled whistleblower and poet, and he'll be speaking about his new book, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure there are any additional questions, so I'm going to say thank you so much, Nathi Ngubane, for your beautiful spirit and this beautiful book, and the bravery and the tenacity to say what needed to be said, not only for yourself, but on behalf of Palestinian children and behalf of South Africans. Thank you so much. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to close out the session and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, PNSA, for having me.